everyone, and welcome to the first episode of our new web series, Academic Innovation Insights. I'm Dr. Chris Pfeiffer, Manager of Strategy and Operations, and I'm joined by Dr. Dean Goon, the Dean of Academic Innovation, to help us introduce this new web series before we dive into the first episode. Dr. Goon, when I brought this idea to you, we initially explored the concept or in the format of a video web podcast of some sort. But then we quickly realized that needed to evolve into something a little more intentional and a little bit more flexible so we could really understand the people and the ideas behind what's going on. As we get into the series, what possibilities do you see for this, and how will our guests help us bring that vision to life?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for organizing this, and what a good idea for us, and how important it is at this particular time in higher education. There is no one series that we could ever do for the complications that we're experiencing in higher education, and so we wanted to have a platform. We wanted to have conversations with those that are both leading on the front, that are thought leaders around topics across all the gamut of higher education. I know when we started talking about this, we were like, well, let's focus in on generative AI. And then we got to thinking like, well, this is more complex because now we need to talk about assessment for the future. We talk about, how do we maintain and retain students in this rapidly changing world? Passions of mine that are, how are we learning differently in the age of AI? So having conversations, are our brains wired differently? What are the expectations of students coming into us? So this platform will give us a lot of opportunity to just explore a wide variety of topics and themes, carry some into multiple episodes, focus in on our current thought leaders across higher education in the same space that we're in of just trying to do good work for the future of learning.
Yeah. What I really like about that, and what you said and the series itself, is it gives us an opportunity to reflect rather than just react. It creates a space for us to slow down, examine the change that's going on, and learn from the people that are affecting that change. Mm-hmm. That brings us to our first guest. We have Dr. Gloria Niles from the University of Hawaii, who is an inspiring and well-regarded digital leader in higher education. What stood out to you about her, and why is she the right person for this first episode?
Well, I couldn't think of a better person to kick off our web series than Dr. Niles. First of all, she was here in Daytona Beach at Palmer Chiropractic College at one point. So spent some time here. So we've had some networking in our lives together. We've also been involved with many of the digital organizations like OLC, WCET, and others that our paths have crossed. But the one thing that stands out about Dr. Niles, if you had to kind of summarize who she is as a leader, is she leads with curiosity. She asks great questions. She asks, the what if type of questions. And what a great place for us to do that, because that's really what we want to do with our web series, is talk about the what ifs. We want to wonder more in higher education, whether it's looking to the future, solving current problems. And one of the reasons that I wanted to include Dr. Niles as one of our first guests on our program is she's developed what's something called the cognitive synergy framework, where she's really blending neuroscience with AI and how we could possibly be entertaining framework for the future of learning. And again, that's a big passion of mine. In our conversation, we could have spent hours taking this apart, but I was so fascinated and so pleased that Dr. Niles joined us on this first one.
Yeah, everything that you mentioned, and having seen your conversation, she does really embody this spirit of innovation and exploration in action. So with that in mind, I think we're ready to share your talk with Dr. Niles. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it. So welcome, Gloria.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, we've got a lot to talk about because we both share this synergy around both neuroscience, but with technology, and now with AI. So this is going to be really good, that we are going to be spending some time really unpacking this. And as context, recently I was at a conference and had a chance to listen to one of your presentations, and I loved what you will be sharing about being curious, but that's my natural mindset. But when you brought up about the cognitive synergy framework, which will be the focus of most of our discussion today, I was very intrigued of how that works within the digital transformation we're going through with AI right now. So I love that. That's a little background of where we're headed with this. But let's learn a little bit about how you got here. Could you share a little bit about your experience and your journey, and then how that led to really this focus with neuroscience?
Sure. So on paper, my background looks very nonlinear. People often say, how did you get from being a doctor of chiropractic to being a director of online learning? And so what ties it all together is that I've always been very curious about how humans learn at all stages of life. And so that curiosity, I also had an interest in health. So I started out my academic career in healthcare. I became a doctor of chiropractic, and then shortly thereafter did postdoctoral training in neurosciences. That led me into more of an educational pathway than a clinical pathway. I started teaching in chiropractic colleges across the country. That led into administrative positions in chiropractic. And then I really decided that I wanted to pursue more of the educational aspects. So I pursued education pathway from K-12 through higher education. Still curious about learning and development. So spent about 12 years in K-12 education, came back into higher education after earning a PhD in education, and also a master's degree in online learning. And so that led me into this field of technology and academic innovation.
Yes, awesome. It just, for many of us in this field, we never meant to go in that direction.
Nobody said, I want to be a director of online learning
Absolutely.
and innovation.
I know, and it's just, it's fascinating. I love hearing people's journey, but here we are today with everything that's going on with AI and just, online learning in itself. I mean, I know that we've had this discussion before, but now we're talking about traditional online learning to where should we be in the future with this and the age of AI and so on. So across, when I think about your whole journey, were there any moments that have kind of led you to, as you develop the cognitive synergy network, is there some moments that you can kind of go back to from either a leadership standpoint or teaching standpoint where you're like, and then again, one thing I think that you bring is really powerful is the study of neuroscience, right? Because most educators, we read about it, but we've not been in it. So can you think of some points in time maybe in your journey where that has led to this development?
I definitely can. This sort of concept of cognitive synergy, before I even had thought of a name for it, it became sort of my leadership style, also my teaching style when I was in the classroom, of really how do you connect human to human and then human to technology in a synergistic way, particularly in teaching. I always train teachers that you are leaders. You are the leader in your classroom, but also a leadership style. So when people say, what is your leadership style? Having my early career in neurosciences, I always go back to how the brain functions. And so sort of brain-based learning has a sort of a different context for me. And I'm always trying to think about how does that connect to the way our brains operate and how we lead and how we interact human to human and human to technology.
Yeah, that just resonates with me so much. My teams are so used to me talking about human connected learning, especially in the digital sphere, because sometimes online learning gets the reputation that it lacks the human touch, and we know that that's a very important part to that. So Embry-Riddle, we have always been in the pursuit of how do we connect with our students in a way that's very meaningful. So that means a lot that you've been on this journey with this. So when I think of the framework, I guess what has kind of stood out to me is the word cognitive synergy, because it kind of makes I don't know, kind of a suggestion that there's some harmony between cognition, technology, and learning. So how did you define that framework? And then I guess a follow-up question I have for you is, why does that matter to higher education today?
Yeah, so it really all came together as AI came onto the scene. And what I noticed was a lot of fear around the disruption of AI, the disruption that AI was bringing, different than other technologies that have, I mean, we always talk about AI in comparison to when calculators came on the
Yeah.
scene, how that impacted math and STEM instruction, when the internet came to be and how that was going to impact education. But this seems different.
Yeah.
The AI seems to be more of a threat to educators across the board, K-12, higher education. And so I really started to think about these aspects that had led my leadership from a brain-based neuroscience perspective. And we hear things in AI like the human in the loop.
Yeah.
But what does that really mean? And it started to occur to me that we really need to emphasize and train educators on what does our human brain do, and what are those capabilities, and really understanding aspects of neuroscience in our interactions with other humans, as well as our interactions with AI. And so that's when it all sort of really came together.
Okay. Yeah. I think of so many conversations I have about AI all the time, and that the one about the calculator just kind of makes me cringe.
Right.
It's like, no, I think we both have been on that journey from when a learning management system came on board. And when I think about it, that was all just a different way to bring knowledge to students, whether it was PowerPoint, moving from an overhead, but this is different. And this is no more about the knowledge part, but we're fundamentally changing how people will work, how they'll lead, and obviously how they learn. And so I think your framework is really on to something as is going to be such a good guide, and well overdue too. And I know that we both come from faculty development background, and I can remember sitting with rank and file faculty and talking about metacognition and things like that, and get these looks like, what is those education jumbo words you're talking about? But we're really at a stage where the potential now to bring in actually brain-based work is right at our fingertips. So absolutely think that that's a great way to go. One of your really foundational principles, which I love, by the way, is this idea of slow down to speed up. Could you kind of help maybe our audience understand what is meant by slow down and speed up in regards to your framework?
Yes. So slow down to speed up is actually one of 4 strategies. And it builds upon the other 3. So I'm going to touch on the other 3 to talk about what we mean by slowing down to speed up. So first is that our brains really operate around curiosity. And so we need to lead with modeling curiosity over certainty. And that means that our brains are open. It kind of relates to a growth mindset, that being open-minded, when our brains are curious, we dive into a subject. We want to know more. Questions generate more questions, and that sense of wonder and just being immersed in a subject. And so it starts with being curious. Then the next step is to, particularly for human-to-human interactions, is to make time for dialogue or conversation before discussion. Discussion is leading to an outcome, but dialogue is really listening to understand a different perspective than yours, not to influence the other person or others or try and make them think like you, but really to unpack and understand why a person feels the way they do. So in AI, you have your conscientious objectors to it. It's going to ruin the world. We need to make it go away. I don't want anything to do with it. But we need to unpack that more. Why do you feel that way? Versus those who are gung-ho and we need to move ahead. So when you're curious, that opens up that opportunity for dialogue. When any humans interact, and even when we interact with technology, there's going to be friction.
Mm-hmm.
Friction is going to happen. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that we didn't predict to happen. And we need to be able to, based on being curious and engaging in dialogue, we need to be able to use that friction as fuel to move forward. And that brings us to the concept of slow down to speed up. Slow down to speed up has to do with our cognitive load. And there are 3 types of cognitive load. But what we're really wanting to maximize is what's called germane cognitive load, which is our curiosity. But we want to be able to offload extraneous things. It lets us maximize that germane load. But to do that, we have to be reflective. We have to metacognitively think about what we're doing. And in the age of AI, everything has been about efficiency.
Exactly.
It's going to make us do more with less. We can give that to AI and we can focus on other things. But unless we're intentional about what we're offloading to AI and how we're offloading it and what are we maximizing germane cognitive load in our human brains by doing that. But if we slow down and we're intentional about that, thinking about it from a cognitive load perspective, then we can actually speed up and AI can help us be more efficient in the most effective manner.
Yeah. Wow, that there's so much there that just keeps resonating in my mind. I mean, be curious. I mean, that's just who I've always been.
Right.
And I that's why we're doing this, is just to ask questions all the time. And I drive probably my wife and family crazy because I still have that why type of mentality. But across higher ed, I don't know, over time, historically, did we start with that and we've moved away from it because it's all been about that knowledge transfer? And your framework is somewhat suggesting that we slow down, which again, I agree with totally, because if it becomes about efficiency of learning, like let's just get it quick, that's probably not the best end goal. So can you think of maybe some practical examples of how you've seen this played out? I mean, I have some in my mind of when I've personally, or when I would teach, how I would put my students in a place. So I was a big inquiry learning STEM instructor. So to get them to grapple with the concept, and back then it was not go to Google and look for an answer, but now we're talking about your guide on the side AI partner. What are some ways that we can slow down that process, but still have AI there as our partner?
Well, some examples are, really breaking down the task at hand based on these 3 types of cognitive load. And what is it that I really need to do? If I offload a certain task to AI, what won't I know or be able to do at the next step?
That's good.
So that's where the metacognition comes in, and understanding intrinsic cognitive load of, the actual complexity of the task versus the extraneous cognitive load, just the things that are taking up space in our brain that technology can do for us, versus, as I mentioned, the germane cognitive load. But one example, I go back to my own teaching of training teachers. And I was teaching a class for elementary educators on health and physical education, because more and more schools are not having PE teachers, dedicated PE teachers, but are expecting elementary teachers to teach health and physical education. But there's so much emphasis in K-12 on reading and math and the subjects that are tested, that there's not really a lot of time. So these teacher educators were thinking of this, that's just a class I have to take, but who teaches health and physical education in their elementary class? And so I created an assignment for them to author a children's book based on health education standards or physical education standards, explaining that this is an authentic assessment. You are the author and potentially the illustrator of this children's book. Think of when an author comes to read to children and they're looked at as this celebrity. Ooh, you're the author of this book. And that they become that author, but maybe they're not an illustrator. And they're like, how am I going to illustrate this children's book? Well, that's something that now can easily be offloaded to AI. And so that was one example early on. Of course, that was a little bit before AI, but that if I was doing that lesson now, we would be using AI for image generation.
Yeah. Not trying to be the doctor of obvious here, but even this morning I was, going through my social media, and there was a picture of a bird in a nest, and then another bird in a nest with a headset on, and the mom bird was telling the little baby bird, it's like, no, you're going to learn to fly. You're not going to be like Johnny, because he's doing a simulation on how to fly. So it's really comes down to that balance. And for I would think individual faculty, based upon their subject matter, based upon so many other factors that would influence, where is that line between man and machine? And it's going to be different for all of us. Right. Well, one thing I like about your framework, though, just to kind of extend that even further, is you weave cognitive science, and then you throw in AI governance, as well as kind of inclusive digital teaching practices into that as well, or transformation. So how do you think those three kind of come together?
Yeah. Well,
and what does that look like?
The AI governance part touches back to something that you mentioned, particularly as we advance in education. And when you get to higher education, post-secondary education, graduate education, professors are very narrow in their subject matter expertise. They are experts in a very specific aspect of their field, and very deep as far as breadth. In our gen eds, we have the breadth of knowledge, and then as you get higher into a particular field, they get very deep in their knowledge. And what we've seen with AI, going back to that fear, is that that's a vulnerable space for a lot of highly educated professors. And we're saying from a governance perspective that this is our new normal. We have to prepare our students for the workforce that they're entering that's going to expect them to integrate AI. But this is new to all of us. And so it's a vulnerable position for educators, which is why we see so much friction around how do we set up governance or policies, or do we set up policies because it's moving so fast that it's faster than our policies typically can be changed. There's a lot of inertia there in institutional policy. And so applying these strategies of approaching it from curiosity. Yes, this is new to all of us. Let's be curious together. How will this impact? How does it apply to what I know about this field? And connecting with industry to how is it impacting the industry? So it's a learning opportunity for everybody, but that goes into how we approach governance. And so these strategies of the cognitive synergy framework help to have that dialogue and address the friction that we see, so that we can get to institutional policies that help us emerge into what I like to call the augmented intelligence era.
Oh, I like that term. I may have to steal that from you if you don't mind.
You're welcome to it.
I know, and you and I mean, we spent a lot of time at a lot of higher education conferences. We're in lots of networks together. And so on, and but if we bring it home to our home institutions, Embry-Riddle, University of Hawaii, and I guess I'm fishing here a little bit too, but I believe we're all experiencing the same. We have the gamut of let's bring out the blue books. No. So we have faculty doing that, and we have others that are running at the speed of light to almost just use AI to use AI versus responsible use. What's your thoughts? I mean, with your experience, and then again, just the layer of digital learning on top of that, of being the advocate for more students are taking online. We know the statistics. We know where the train has always been headed with online learning. So I guess the question in there for me is how have maybe the faculty that you get to be up in front of, whether conferences or at the University of Hawaii, how have they resonated, or have they have one particular bent, or is it like all of us, it's all over the place?
It's all over the place. No matter whether I'm at the University of Hawaii talking to our faculty or nationally talking to faculty, there seems to be the full range. And I would say that academic integrity concerns are still the number one.
Mm-hmm.
My students are cheating, and I hate that term. It makes me cringe.
Yeah.
I think it's a misalignment of goals.
Mm-hmm.
Students are being effective in their goal, which is to pass a class. And if they're not curious about the subject, then their goal is not to dive deep into learning these objectives. It's to get a grade on a transcript so I can get to the next step.
Absolutely.
So they're being efficient in their goal, but the faculty's goal is they want, we always want all of our students to just like be immersed in our topic and love it as much as we do, but that's not always the case. But in the academic integrity aspect of it, I'm really concerned about the faculty who want to go backwards.
Yeah.
From a neuroscience perspective, I'll just touch on the Blue Book example of faculty wanting in-person exams in an online class. Well, that goes against the whole premise of online learning. But also, I like to point out to faculty who think that's okay from a neuroscience perspective. I said, our traditional age students have come through K-12 with keyboards. They have never written anything in longhand form, let alone an exam. And so one, you're going to have a hard time reading their handwriting. And two, going back to the cognitive load, they're going to be spending their cognitive load on trying to express themselves in long form handwriting than they are going to be in being able to express what they understand about the subject matter, just from the motor and cognitive aspects of that.
Yeah. No, that reminds me, we recently had I hosted Dean's Learning Series, and we had a representative from Boeing, which is in charge of their AI and data strategy on there, Dr. Seth. And so we were asking him pinpoint questions about what does industry need. And obviously coming from industry, they're not saying like, please make sure that they can take notes on that piece of paper. I mean, we don't hear things like that. But they're also, they want people to have, the typical language we use is the critical thinking and basis, being able to solve problems. And I don't like to call those soft skills. Those are going to be really hard skills in the future if we automate more learning. But he also mentioned, obviously, having your graduates have AI literacy, knowing how, being able to solve their problems. So I see, again, when we really think of the bigger picture here, it's this idea that we will have a world in higher education where we hope that we can exercise more critical thinking. And I think that plays right into your framework with the idea that we are slow down, right, to go. And to me, I'm excited about that, but I could see how that becomes a threat to some, because we could also look at your framework. Oh, Dr. Niles says to slow down. I know what we can do to slow down. Let's do a Blue Book. No, we don't want that. No, that's not it at all.
That's not going to speed up anything.
Well, and an integral part of your framework is also the human-centered approach to that. And I know that, again, with something that we both advocate for. So how do we help faculty realize that, again, it's not about automating learning, but you are getting time back to be that mentor. But it's going to also require, I believe, it's going to require more of you, even though we might even automate, heaven forbid, the assessment process. AI, we're already seeing what it can do across many industries. Whether it's reading legal documents at 99.9% accuracy or whatever the case might be. I mean, so when you think about from a human-centered standpoint, what have you thought about how maybe the framework will help faculty move even closer to being human-centered in their work?
That's a great question. And I think it goes back to the first strategy of being curious, and that faculty can bring more curiosity into their classroom. The types of dialogue that they have with their students, because they're not spending so much time on sort of the mechanics of teaching. But it really is a shift in how we design instruction and design for those opportunities for faculty to be curious and for them to allow space for that curiosity. Because I think a lot of times in education, we've moved away from that in our pedagogy. We want students have been trained, the question, is that going to be on the test? To really having deeper, more curious questions.
Yeah. And I know that we both, leading online strategy, something that I challenge both our teams with and others is, how do we get that human-centered part back into that? Because, for some people that look from the outside in at online learning, we hear words like, that's very transactional, do the work, get the grade, and move on. But for many of us that take this work very seriously, we want to see the human-centered part be part of that. And I guess my question there is like, what have you been thinking about? Like, how do we get better with digital transformation, but not lose sight of being human-centered, especially with our faculty? And we'll talk about, your focus with faculty development, because I know that's a passion that you have as well. But what can we help our faculty do differently, especially for those of us that teach online?
Yeah, and I think that's where AI in particular can be an asset. Faculty can have conversations with AI. Like if they're exploring a topic, if they're curious about a new aspect, that they want to try it out somewhere before they try it out with their students in their classroom, have a conversation with AI about this. And as a subject matter expert, you can then think about and dialogue like, well, that's not really accurate. Maybe there's a bias in the training models that they notice and they see, but they can use technology to expand their own curiosity. And then thinking in those ways, how do I bring this to my students? To really invest in their lifelong learning abilities and motivation and interest.
No, I mean, with the world of AI, we've talked about, all of us having our own bot to do these certain things. And I go back to your previous comment with subject matter experts. And if anything, if anyone is interested, our expanded knowledge base is just going to be huge because we have this partner. And it's, I think over time when I used to run a teaching and learning center and, you're always just trying to get faculty in just to give them one little piece of advice or pedagogy or help them develop a better course or redesign, and that's been such hard work. But now faculty will have a partner like that, or at least we hope they will, right?
Well, yeah, with the digital transformation and what we're seeing in access to knowledge, there are so many opportunities, even beyond what we provide as professional development for faculty. Things like the format of masterclass, where you can take a whole class in 80 minutes. And it's broken down into maybe 4 or 5 minute segments or little chunks that when you have a few minutes, you can listen to a couple of segments. So sort of that micro learning aspect and it's information at your fingertips. So as soon as you have a thought or an idea and you're curious about something, you can have access to that information within seconds or minutes. And really shifting to that sort of micro-learning model in professional development.
Wow. Our teams right now, we're in the midst of, which we've been in for a while, we're not trying to predict the future, but we look at these trends. We're also saying, what is really the future, especially of online learning, because Embry-Riddle worldwide, a majority of our courses are online across the world, and we have some hybrid examples. But what resonated to me as I kind of tie that framework back is your framework is flexible enough to fit into our worlds of digital learning. And even though you just mentioned like micro learning, why cannot more curriculum have those curious moments now?
Yeah.
Because we know that students will be getting to the knowledge faster with
Right.
AI,
Right.
Create seconds of creating their own simulations, or using using AI on the assignment to help you actually write. So we're taking AI is going to help students take a little bit off of their plate, but the idea that they're really going to have to dive deep and make sure and validate their work and make sure the resources are correct. It's figuring out what holes are missing in theories that they've looked at. I mean, this is really going to fundamentally change. And I think for us, we're looking at a disruption in digital transformation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with the speed of the technology advancing, to even things like, I know at the beginning of this academic year, the next big fear, aside from browsers and agents being able to be unleashed on the LMS and take the whole class for the student, were wearables. The AI glasses, and so now they're going to have glasses that are feeding them taking pictures of the questions and feeding them the answers through their frames. But also on the other side of that, from the cognitive synergy framework, the opportunities that opens up in just curiosity about the world, and again, immediate access to information through technology.
Well, I know that comes natural to us.
Right.
You wouldn't have on your shirt, be
curious
curious if you were not. So that's something you just can't fake.
Right.
But I do think we got our work to cut out on, if your personality doesn't lean into that, it's going to be a challenge for faculty to help their students unleash. But we know, I love that you touched on K-12. It starts so early on of capturing their curiosity to learning. And that's just work that we're going to have to do. Your last statement really made me think too about, it's probably a good place to kind of think about closing out is the future of learning. We love to fantasize about where we're going, but in our world, we are looking, I always say that I don't look at trends, but I look at signals. Like what's signaling? And you mentioned one, it's like wearable glasses. You're not seeing a lot of that across the literature yet. But we could see it happening, and many of us own them, and we're like, oh, this could be real interesting, right? So what are some major trends that you kind of foresee for higher education? We might as well throw in cognitive science and AI that will be reshaping maybe our institutions, if you had to look at those higher future trends.
Well, one that we touched on was the microlearning, that learning is going to be chunked into very small segments, and with immediate access. And another trend is going to be personalization, that even if we have a set of learning outcomes on a syllabus for a class, it's really going to be about how the individual student wants to engage with those learning outcomes. How does it tie to their professional goals, to their lived experience, and how can they personalize it? And that's what their chatbot is going to be able to do, that follows them from course to course, throughout their educational journey, and can connect the dots from course to course, or from course to their aspirational goals. So I think we're really going to see a shift in personalization through the use of AI. And then our institutions are really going to have to change.
Yeah.
We're going to have to change with the times. And that's where the AI governance comes in. How are we going to change, and how are we going to adapt into this era of augmented intelligence?
Yeah, that's good stuff. Just about a week ago, I had a conversation with some administration and faculty, and for years I've been talking about personalization of learning. We've been pie in the sky thinking that we could actually have 25 individuals in the class, and they all could be at different places, but they're all learning, mastery learning, all these dreams that we've had. Technology is going to help us with that. But I got pushback. And the pushback is like, I'm a math professor. I know what they need. They shouldn't be able to pick.
Right.
I'm like, well, wait a minute. If we know these are the outcomes that students need to accomplish, that's really the role of faculty. But how the students demonstrate their knowledge should be up to them.
Right.
So I do think we have our work cut out.
We do.
Because people were all okay with personalization kind of staying on the shelf. And so now we're here. So now that's no longer teaching to the middle or teaching up high and trying to bring everybody up, but it's going to be that. So that's a really good place to end on. So with your framework, do you see your framework evolving as these trends and things come along? Did you build kind of a flexibility or adaptable thinking into that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely think it will evolve as higher education evolves and technology evolves. But one constant will be the way our brains are structured.
Mm.
And I think if we really highlight that as far as the human-centeredness and really understanding how we interact with each other and how we interact with technology from the standpoint of being the owner of our own brains, and really leading with that from a neuroscience perspective, I think will help us navigate these transitions and disruptions.
Wonderful, wonderful. Gloria, this has been such a meaningful conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you for all your insights. We will definitely be keeping track of the cognitive synergy framework. And I see now you have a logo. This is all good coming forward. We're hoping to partner with you in the future because I believe it's something our Embry-Riddle faculty should be well aware of and adapting and applying in the work that they do. And to our audience, I hope this, I don't say hope, I know this has been a wonderful conversation for you to intake. There's resources that we will make available about the cognitive synergy framework and how you can apply that to your everyday teaching and learning. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe for future episodes. And learn more about DAI and the work we're doing. Follow us on LinkedIn using the link in the description below.